More than 1 million COVID cases, according to data from Johns Hopkins University, as the Omicron variant continues to spread at a blistering pace. After a bruising holiday week of flight cancellations and record surges in COVID-19 cases, a powerful winter snowstorm further snarled U.S. transport, shuttering the federal government and bringing Washington to a standstill. And fallen U.S. biotech star Elizabeth Holmes is convicted of defrauding investors in her blood testing startup Theranos in a high-profile case seen as an indictment of Silicon Valley culture. And the central Chinese city of Yuzhou in Henan province is locked down as part of the country's zero COVID strategy after 3 asymptomatic cases are found there. First in our news, the United States recorded more than 1 million COVID cases on Monday, according to data from Johns Hopkins University, as the Omicron variant continues to spread at a blistering pace. Johns Hopkins also reported 1,688 deaths for the same period, a day after top U.S. pandemic advisor Anthony Fauci had said the country is experiencing almost a vertical increase in COVID cases, but the peak may be only weeks away. A substantial increase in coronavirus infections was expected when this week's numbers came out, but nothing like this. About 1 of every 100 Americans will have been reported as a positive case in just the last week, according to the data from Johns Hopkins University. Rates of deaths and hospitalization in the U.S. have been far lower in recent weeks, though, than during previous COVID surges, with 9,382 deaths over the past 7 days. The nation's death toll has fallen by 10% week on week. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris plan to meet with the White House coronavirus response team to discuss a course of action as Omicron becomes ubiquitous, according to USA Today. And U.S. health authorities on Monday approved Pfizer's COVID-19 booster shot for children as young as 12 and reduced the wait time between initial vaccination and an extra dose from 6 months to 5 for all ages. The decision by the FDA comes as the pandemic, driven by the highly transmissible Omicron variant, flares up and as school children return by the millions to class following the holiday break. The FDA also approved a booster dose of Pfizer-BioNTech's vaccine for immunocompromised children between the ages of 5 and 11, including, for example, individuals who have received an organ transplant. The agency said it relied in particular on data from Israel, where thousands of children aged 12 to 15 have already received the booster dose. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention still needs to give its final approval for the decisions expected in the coming days. Hospitalizations of children sick with COVID are on the rise, with vaccination rates notably lower among young children. And staying in the U.S., widespread amounts of 5 to 10 inches blanketed the area with up to a foot south of Washington. The heavy snow and gusty winds caused extensive power outages. Washington correspondent Arlene Ocampo is in Washington with much more of the conditions there. Arlene.
Students set to return to school campuses on the first Monday of the new year were greeted with cancellation notices as heavy snowdrops on many parts of the U.S. East Coast, extending the winter break of many. According to the National Weather Service, a dynamic low-pressure system will fuel significant weather impacts across parts of the southeast coast and mid-Atlantic over the next few days. Rain has turned into snow over much of the Washington, D.C. region Monday morning. Many residents of the nation's capital stare out their windows to take in the view of the year's first snowfall. The NWS predicts between 4 to 8 inches of snow to fall from the southern Appalachians through Washington, D.C. and into southern New Jersey by Monday evening. The Weather Service says localized higher amounts between 8 to 12 inches are possible, with the heaviest snow to fall at a rate of 2 inches an hour. The weather condition makes for tricky commutes for those who still had to go into work. Local commutes were not the only ones affected by heavy snow and rainfall. Airline travelers were left waiting for hours at airports throughout the country as inclement weather has disrupted scheduled flights. According to flight tracking website FlightAware, nearly 3,500 flights Monday, the first workday of 2022, were already canceled as of 9:45 a.m., including 2,000 U.S. flights or international ones starting or finishing in the United States. These cancellations were in addition to the 2,700 U.S. flights canceled Sunday and 2,750 grounded on Saturday. Arlene Campo, Eagle News, Washington.
One person has been found and two are still feared dead following a devastating Colorado wildfire that wiped out swaths of several towns and forced thousands of people to flee with little notice, according to officials. Boulder County Sheriff Joe Perez said of 3 reported missing, one of those persons has been accounted for alive and well, adding that a search was ongoing for the remaining 2. He also said hot debris that has been covered by snow has, however, hampered recovery efforts. The so-called Marshall Fire, which was sparked in a tinder dry landscape, was fanned by winds gusting at more than 100 miles an hour on Thursday. And as the blaze raced through the towns of Superior and Louisville, just outside the state's biggest city, Denver, tens of thousands of people were forced to flee with little notice. Within the burn zone, roughly 1,000 customers remained without electricity power Sunday. Alice Jackson with Xcel Energy said, while more than 11,000 remained without gas. Although fires are a natural part of the climate cycle and help to clear dead brush, their scale and intensity are increasing. Scientists say a warming climate, chiefly caused by human activities such as the unchecked burning of fossil fuels, is altering weather patterns. And a fire that ravaged South Africa's parliament has been contained after strong winds had reignited the blaze, according to firefighters today. The fire began in the early hours on Sunday and devastated much of the parliament complex before it was declared under control on Monday morning. But strong winds reignited the blaze late in the afternoon. A 49-year-old man who had been arrested on Sunday inside the parliament building appeared in court today, charged with housebreaking, arson, and damaging state property. No casualties have been reported in the fire, but the damage to the nation's parliament has shocked the country. The fire started at around 5 a.m. local time Sunday in the wood-paneled older part of the complex, a section that once housed South Africa's first parliament. Completed in 1884, the historic section is where Parliament keeps treasures, including around 4,000 heritage and artworks, some dating back to the 17th century. And take a look at these images of flood damages at a home in Malaysian town Gemas, and of people taking refuge at a shelter inside a school. Thousands of people have fled swamped homes as heavy rains exacerbated flooding in 7 Malaysian states. Take a look.
Perasaan saya memang tak boleh nak cakap apa. Menggigil satu hari satu malam saya tak lalu makan dan saya tak boleh nak minum sebab terlalu panik sangat. Badan saya menggigil, terlalu ketakutan pun dia untuk selamatkan diri. Macam-macam perasaan saya tak boleh nak digambarkan. Terlalu takut. Saya sedih lah sebab saya tak dapat selamatkan satu benda pun. Saya alhamdulillah bersyukur sebab saya dah dapat selamatkan diri saya sendiri daripada banjir itu.
Some 50 people have been killed so far, a police Facebook post on Saturday said, with 2 still missing. The tropical Southeast Asian nation often faces stormy weather around the year's end, with seasonal flooding regularly causing mass evacuations. But authorities have been taken by surprise by the days of constant rain that began on December 17, and it caused rivers to overflow and inundated cities. And neighboring Indonesia, about 24,000 people have been evacuated. 2 children killed in floods there in Sumatra Island, according to officials on Tuesday, with environmental campaigners blaming deforestation for the worsening disaster. Torrential rains have hammered the island for days, causing rivers to burst their banks and sending water levels surging in residential areas, according to the National Disaster Agency. Environmental NGO Wali said the flooding was worsened by deforestation to make way for Sumatra's expansive palm oil plantations, and trees act as natural defenses against floods, slowing the rate at which water runs down hills and into rivers. At least 8 people have been killed in flash flooding in Iran's south due to heavy rains expected to last until later this week, according to state media. The weather system is expected to last until Friday. An official from Iran's meteorological agency said bad weather has been affecting not only southern Iran, but also Arab countries in the Gulf in recent days, with several issuing weather warnings. Torrential rainfall has hit the United Arab Emirates, including Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and caused widespread flooding in the region. Back to pandemic news. Here in the country, the Department of Health today reported 611 new recoveries and 5,434 additional cases of COVID-19. Recoveries are now at 2,779,706, or 97.2% of the total 2,861,119 infections since the pandemic started in March 2020. Active cases climbed to 29,809, of which 24,026 are mild, 3,020 are moderate, 889 are asymptomatic, 328 are critical, and 1,546 are severe. Of the 5,434 reported cases today, 5,395 or 99% occurred within the recent 14 days, December 22 to today. That is according to the DOH. And as in the previous day, the top regions with most cases in the recent 2 weeks were the NCR with 3,826 or 71% of new infections, Calabarzon 864 or 16%, and Central Luzon with 333 or 6%. The death toll has reached 51,604 with 18 new deaths, representing 1.8% of overall cases. And the Philippine government is now eyeing to start the vaccination of children aged 5 to 11 years old against COVID-19 this month. Presidential Advisor for COVID-19 Response, Secretary Vince Dizon, said they are now in talks with Pfizer for the purchase of the necessary vaccine for the said age group.
Hopefully, pati yung 5 to 11, pagkakuha natin ng supply natin galing sa Pfizer ngayong buwan ng January, masimulan na rin natin. So yan ang fina-follow up namin ngayon sa ating mga suppliers, sa Pfizer International, para po makapag-deliver na sila ng ating mga bakuna para sa ating 5 to 11. Dahil nakita natin ngayon, pati mga kabataan natin, lalo na yung mga exposed sa mga densely populated areas ay tinatamaan ng COVID-19. Kaya dapat i-prioritize natin ang pagpabibilis ng pagbabakuna sa ating mga kabataan.
To note, only Pfizer was able to secure an emergency use authorization from the FDA that allowed the use of its COVID-19 vaccine for those 5 to 11 years old. Dizon said the government is prioritizing the vaccination of minors below 12 due to their high risk from infection. And based from its national COVID vaccination dashboard data last Sunday, the DOH said the government was able to fully vaccinate 49.85 million of its over 100 million population. Dizon also said they're targeting to increase this figure to 70 million by the end of February or early March. Meanwhile, a total of 16 areas in Metro Manila are now under granular lockdown as Alert Level 3 has been raised in the NCR from January 3 215, according to the Philippine National Police today. PNP data show that 14 areas are under the jurisdiction of the Northern Police District and one each for the Manila Police District and Southern Police District. Nationwide, the number of areas under granular lockdown also increased from 8 to 27, including the NCR, Mimaropa, and the Cordillera regions. NCR Police Office Chief Major General Vicente Danao Jr. reiterated his call for the stricter implementation of guidelines and health protocols to curb the spread of COVID-19 in communities, especially amid the rise in the number of cases and the Omicron variant. And aside from the NCR, the provinces of Rizal, Bulacan, and Cavite have also been placed under Alert Level 3 following the rising number of COVID cases in these areas. Under Alert Level 3, a 30% indoor venue capacity and 50% outdoor venue capacity will be allowed for some activities provided employees are fully vaccinated. However, face-to-face or in-person classes for basic education, contact sports, except those conducted under the bubble-type setup, fun fairs, carnivals, and kid amusement industries, venues with live voice or wind instrument performers, and audiences, casinos, horse racing, cockfighting, and operation of cockpits, betting shops and other gaming establishments, and gatherings in residences with individuals not belonging to the same household will be prohibited. And criminal charges were filed before the Makati City Prosecutor's Office against quarantine skipper Gwyneth Anchua and 8 other individuals who were involved in the breach of protocol late last year. Upon her arrival from the U.S. on December 22, Chua checked in at Berjaya Makati Hotel along Makati Avenue, went home, and then went to a nearby bar in Barangay Poblacion the day after. She, fellow partygoers, and some employees of the bar later turned out positive for COVID. Chua was reportedly picked up by her father after less than an hour at the hotel, while security camera video showed her at a restaurant the next day. She returned to the hotel on the night of December 25, accompanied by her mother. CIDG did not find sufficient evidence, though, to charge Chua's close contacts, but they were encouraged to also sue her, especially those whom she allegedly infected at the party. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. More than 1 million people in a city in central China were being confined to their homes today after 3 asymptomatic coronavirus cases were recorded in the country's latest mass lockdown. Beijing has pursued a zero-COVID approach with tight border restrictions and targeted lockdowns since the virus first emerged. Yuzhou, a city with a population of around 1.17 million people in Henan province, announced that from Monday night, all citizens were required to stay home to control the spread of the virus. The announcement was triggered by the discovery of 3 cases in the last couple of days. People in the central area must not go out, according to a statement posted Monday, while all communities will set up sentinels and gates to strictly implement epidemic prevention and control measures. The city had already announced that it was halting bus and taxi services and closing shopping malls, museums, and tourist attractions. In other news, a billionaire and a darling of the Silicon Valley. She promised a revolutionary blood testing technology. But now, Elizabeth Holmes is now a convicted felon. The jury returned its verdict in her trial, and jurors took 7 days of deliberations to reach their verdict, finding her guilty of 4 counts of tricking investors into pouring money into what she claimed was a revolutionary testing system. 2 for wire fraud and 1 for wire fraud against Theranos investors. But the panel also acquitted her on 4 charges. They did not find her guilty on conspiracy against patients, 1 count of test results, and 2 counts patient results. The 37-year-old now faces the possibility of 20 years behind bars for each conviction. Holmes had vowed to revolutionize health diagnostics with self-service machines that could run an array of tests on just a few drops of blood, a vision that drew high-profile backers and made her a billionaire by the age of 30. Though big-name Theranos investors like Rupert Murdoch and Henry Kissinger were on the witness list, the most prominent backer to take the stand was ex-Pentagon chief Jim Mattis. The defense called only one significant witness, Holmes herself, as it argued the fallen entrepreneur had genuinely believed in Theranos' vision, invested herself heavily in its success, and had simply failed. She remains at liberty ahead of another hearing on the terms of her bail next week. No date was set for sentencing. Back to pandemic news. Britain on Tuesday faced warnings of an impending hospital crisis due to staff shortages caused by a wave of Omicron infections as the country returned to work after the holidays. Daily case numbers chalked up multiple records in the run-up to New Year, with Prime Minister Boris Johnson promising action to plug staffing gaps in the worst-hit areas. The state-run National Health Service, which is regularly under strain during the winter months from seasonal respiratory infections, is struggling with staff forced to stay at home after testing positive. Minister for Vaccines and Public Health Maggie Throop told Sky News it was unclear how many Britons were currently in self-isolation after the holiday surge in the highly transmissible virus mutation. Matthew Taylor, Chief Executive of the NHS Confederation, which represents healthcare providers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, said cases appeared to have leveled off in London. But he told Times Radio that staff shortages and rising cases across the rest of the country were a concern. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Johnson warned the pressure on hospitals is going to be considerable in the course of the next couple of weeks and maybe more as Omicron cases surge. Patricia Rodriguez has the details.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Monday said that the UK state-run hospitals will face considerable pressure in the coming weeks due to the steep rise in virus infections. Speaking during a visit to the vaccine center, Johnson said that the pressure on NHS hospitals is going to be considerable in the course of the next couple of weeks and maybe more as Omicron continues to surge through the country. The UK saw record numbers of cases in the last days of 2021, though it has not yet released figures for the whole country this year. UK is one of Europe's worst affected with a death toll of nearly 149,000. The Prime Minister said that he was aware of high levels of hospital staff absences due to COVID, adding that they are looking at what they can do to move people into those areas that are particularly badly affected. Around 50,000 NHS staff were absent from work Friday because they were ill or self-isolating due to COVID-19. Chris Hobson, the chief executive of NHS Providers, which represents hospitals in England, told Sky News that the pressure on hospitals outside London is now growing after the capital bore the brunt of virus cases earlier. Johnson urged the public to get a booster vaccination, saying there are slots available for 2 million people this week. So far, almost 34 million people have received the booster jab. The Prime Minister defended his decision not to increase virus restrictions over the festive period in England, unlike in other UK regions. The number of people in hospital with COVID in England was reported on Sunday as the highest since Feb at more than 13,000, with 769 of those on ventilators. Here's the latest statement from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Well, it's been a difficult year for our city, our country, and across the globe. We've seen new variants of this awful virus, but I've been really impressed and proud by the way we've responded, coming together. The NHS volunteers rolling out record numbers of vaccines, and now the booster we've seen in our city. More than 16.6 million Londoners receiving the vaccine. Well, if you can compare and contrast London hospitals today versus last year, thankfully, a few people in the hospitals with COVID, thankfully, a few people in ICU, intensive care with COVID, but unfortunately, the case numbers are 3 times higher today than this time last year. The case rate in London is 80% higher today than last year, but also admissions in our hospitals over the last month have gone up by almost 300%. We're seeing more and more staff being absent.
Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Patricia Rodriguez. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, Australia reported a record daily tally of nearly 50,000 cases as Omicron races through the population and sends people scrambling for tests. Deputy Chief Medical Officer Sonia Bennett said Australia had recorded 47,738 infections in the past 24 hours, up from about 38,000 cases the previous day as the Omicron variant took hold. COVID cases being treated in hospitals across the country had nearly doubled in a week to 2,362 infections, she said. COVID cases, but the number in intensive care was much smaller, though, 184. And of those, 59 were on a ventilator, unchanged from a week ago. Despite the soaring infection rate, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has resisted calls to make the rapid antigen tests free. In other news, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was rushed to hospital early Monday with abdominal pain that doctors found was caused by a partial intestinal blockage and is facing potential surgery 9 months out from elections. Take a look. Now, Bolsonaro, 66 years old, was on vacation at the beach in the southern state of Santa Catarina when the pain started, according his latest health problem since being stabbed in the abdomen during the 2018 presidential campaign that brought him to power. Bolsonaro posted a picture of himself, as you can see here, in his hospital bed on Twitter, flashing the thumbs up sign with a message saying he was facing possible surgery for an internal blockage in the abdominal region. Bolsonaro has undergone at least 4 surgeries stemming from the knife attack that nearly killed him, perpetrated by a man who claimed he was following God's orders and who was later ruled mentally unfit to stand trial. Now, Bolsonaro's medical team said the president was suffering from an intestinal subocclusion, partial blockage of the intestinal tract. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Samahan ang paborito nating barkada sa umaga. Magbibigay ng saya, tawanan, at iba't ibang pakulo sa inyong umaga. Busog pa kayo sa kaalaman, Tony knows, at updated sa umaarangkadang mga balita. Matutong kumita, magluto, mayroon ding sayawan at kantahan.
What? I am a good girl.
Ang programa na nagbibigay inspirasyon sa bawat kada all over the world.
Here in Net25, we are your fans.
Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 6 hanggang alas 8 ng umaga. Dito lang sa Net25. At home kayo rito.
Welcome back. The Philippine economy may post a growth of 5 to 6% in 2021 on the back of easing mobility restrictions, particularly in the last quarter of the year, according to a local think tank. In its latest market call report, First Metro Investment Corp, University of Asia and the Pacific, or UAP Capital Markets Research, said the economy's growth will also be buoyed by the growth of the manufacturing sector. The think tank pointed out that IHS Market Philippines Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, continued to increase. In November, PMI improved to 51.7, an 8-month high from 51 in October. However, UA&P economist Victor A. Abola told the Business Mirror on Monday that the alert level 3 status may dampen this outlook. And U.S. telecoms giant AT&T and Verizon on Monday agreed to postpone their deployment of 5G wireless service over concerns that it may interfere with flight safety equipment. AT&T and airline officials said AT&T confirmed the deal in a statement, noting that at the request of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, we have voluntarily agreed to one additional 2-week delay of deployment of the C-band 5G services. The move came a day after AT&T and Verizon rebuffed the request to delay their rollout of 5G technology scheduled for Wednesday, prompting airlines to threaten legal action. Aviation regulators have raised concerns that the new system might interfere with the devices planes use to measure altitude, and the rollout, initially scheduled for December 5, had already been postponed once. for Entrepreneurship and Go Negosyo founder Joey Concepcion said during the Laging Handa briefing, Concepcion remains optimistic despite the spike of COVID cases following the holidays and the presence of Omicron variant. Let's listen in.
What I can assure you that I think I'm extremely bullish. I'm very bullish that 2022 will be definitely a much better year than 2021. Why? We have the vaccines. It's now here in our country. Ang dami nito. Now, dati, last year, wala tayong bakuna, kulang bakuna, maraming delay. Pero ngayon, we have the ammunition. Number two, ang kalaban natin yung mga vaccine hesitant. So, itong ginawa ng mga IATF, mandating on-site workers to take the vaccine or else they will have to take the RT-PCR test, will cost them 70,000 pesos. And the Metro Manila Mayor, sana sumunod dito sa buong bansa natin yung mga governors who are now going to restrict the movement of the unvaccinated. So that is great news kasi mapupuwersi sila kumuha ng bakuna or else they will not be able to go out of their house. No? So strictly speaking, and that's what they're doing to try to protect them. So we are now pushing hard on really getting the people vaccinated. And okay, it is maybe more pressure kasi kailangan natin yan. We want to end this pandemic this year in 2022 para at least yung mga negosyante at yung business natin ay umunlad para makatulong dito sa government sa pagbayad ng mga buwis nila at the government can continue to fund yung vaccines. You know, the government cannot sustain buying the vaccines for its people forever. No, this is going to be a huge budget. But for the time being, while this pandemic is on, it has no choice. But eventually, this will have to go back to the private sector, us buying the vaccines. So we will have to have a vibrant economy to be able to afford buying these vaccines. No?
In other business news, shares in embattled Chinese property giant Evergrande rallied on Tuesday after a day-long suspension as the company confirmed it had been ordered to demolish part of a resort in Hainan province. Chinese property firms have struggled in the wake of Beijing's drive to curb excessive debt in the real estate sector as well as rampant consumer speculation. Evergrande confirmed on Tuesday that it had received orders to tear down 39 buildings at the Ocean Flower Island development in the southern Chinese province. The decision came from authorities on December 30 and only affected one plot of land under development, according to the company in an announcement to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The company shares climbed as much as 10% soon after opening for the afternoon session in Hong Kong before settling back to end 1.26% up at $1.61 Hong Kong dollars. Authorities have said the structures were built illegally on an artificial archipelago in the tourist hub, according to Chinese media. And here's a look at the first look at the CES Tech Show, where we can see some nibbling cats and some new techs on COVID masks. Take a look.
Le masque Airsoft, le masque le plus efficace du monde, qui protège les gens contre toutes les agressions virales, bactériennes, de toutes les nanoparticules et microparticules. C'est le masque, donc aujourd'hui, c'est l'outil fantastique pour lutter contre la crise du Covid. Parce que avec ce masque, vous n'aurez pas besoin de faire une 4e vaccination, une 5e et une 6e, en fonction de toutes les variantes du virus et de tous les nouveaux virus qui vont arriver dans le futur.
L'air est totalement filtré par le masque. L'air, il vient de l'extérieur, il est tiré par le ventilateur et il est donné à l'intérieur au niveau du nez. Et donc il est intégralement filtré. Et effectivement, quand vous faites des longs trajets en avion, en train ou autre, là vous pouvez respirer normalement à nouveau.
a robot drives it, right? Nobody drives it. So it's completely self-driven, meaning that there's a computer algorithm, there's a software that tells the car what to do. It takes the information from the sensors and it tells the car whether to turn, whether to brake, whether to accelerate, whether to overtake another vehicle. It has to be completely autonomous, driven really by AI technology. A lot of industry investment has been in low-speed automation for urban settings or suburban settings, but we know that autonomous vehicles are going to need to operate on highways at speeds of 70, 80, or even 100 miles an hour, but nobody's really been testing that. So race cars and racing in general is a great platform to push the technology to the absolute edge and find what it's capable of.
Yeah, in like a COVID situation, people staying at home all day, it gives you a very good comfort. The biting robot that bites your finger softly.
Ace Amagami translates roughly to sweet biting in English. Japanese entrepreneur Shunsuke Aoki transformed that impulse into a small battery-powered plush creature that nibbles gently on your finger. And he said young dogs or cats will harmlessly do the same thing, which is a source of comfort for people during this time. CES is one of the world's largest trade fairs, and it's pushing ahead with an in-person edition after being online only last year due to the pandemic. Now, who will be behind the wheel of the race cars scheduled to hit the track at CES? No one, because it's completely self-driven. There's software that tells the car what to do. According to Paul Mitchell, the president and CEO of Energy Systems Network, the organizers of the Indy Autonomous Challenge Racing Competition. Autonomous cars will race on Friday on the Las Vegas Motor Speedway at speeds of up to 160 miles per hour. And the exercise is not just for fun. Mitchell said the competition tests autonomous tech at high speed so that one day cars can operate themselves on highways. In an interview with AFP head of Beijing 2022 Olympic Organizing Committee's media department, it says that the preparatory work for the Winter Olympics is ready and that Beijing is ready. Take a look.
我们也在高度关注奥密克戎这个毒株对全球疫情的影响。从目前的情况上来看呢，我们和国际奥委会、国际常委会 联合发布的防疫手册的所确定的防疫的措施是行之有效的。我想，当奥运火炬点燃的那一刻，当奥运会圆满成功的那一刻，任何抵制的声音，在这个奥运更团结的口号下，都会消弭的。
And Beijing sealed up its Winter Olympic bubble on Tuesday, preparing the Games venues, transport, and staff for the world's strictest mass sporting event since the global pandemic. China, where the virus emerged toward the end of 2019, has pursued a zero-tolerance strategy on COVID and is taking the same approach to limit the pandemic's potential impact on the February 4 to 20 Winter Olympics and subsequent Paralympics. Starting Tuesday, thousands of Games-related staff, volunteers, cleaners, cooks, and coach drivers will be cocooned for weeks in the so-called closed loop with no direct physical access to the outside world. And that contrasts with the COVID-delayed Tokyo Summer Olympics, which allowed some movement in and out for volunteers and other personnel. The global media and roughly 3,000 athletes are expected to start arriving in the Chinese capital in the weeks ahead and will remain in the bubble for the moment they land until they leave the country. Anyone entering the bubble must be fully vaccinated or face a 21-day quarantine when they touch down, and everyone inside will be tested daily, and they must wear face masks at all times. And in NBA action, Anthony Simmons scored a career-best 43 points as the Portland Trailblazers snapped a 4-game losing streak with a 136-131 win over the Atlanta Hawks on Monday. Simon shot 13 of 21 from the floor, drained 9 of 16 from the three-point line, and sank all 8 of his 3 free throws in front of a crowd of 15,100 at the Moda Center Arena. Trae Young led the Hawks by scoring an NBA season-high 56 points. Young shot 17 for 26 from the field and added 14 assists in the loss. Young's 56 points surpassed Kevin Durant's 51-point performance for the Nets at Detroit on December 12. Golden State's Stephen Curry and Boston's Jaylen Brown have also had 50-point games this season. Young also became the first player with 50 points plus and a 14-plus assists in an NBA game since James Harden did it with the Houston Rockets in 2016. The game marked Young's second 50-point performance of his career, as he previously scored 50 against Miami on February 20 last year. Or February 2020. Portland played without Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum, and Cody Zeller. Trailblazers coach Chauncey Billups was back on the bench after missing 3 games due to COVID-19 measures. Norman Powell scored 26. Nasir Little added 22 in the win for Portland. And elsewhere, Joel Embiid posted his third career triple-double with 31 points, 15 rebounds, and 10 assists to power the Philadelphia 76ers past the struggling Houston Rockets 133-113. Furkan Korkmaz added 24 points and a career-high 11 rebounds. Isaiah Joe scored 18 points. Seth Curry contributed 15, and Tobias Harris had 14 as the Sixers won their 4th straight game. Garrison Matthews scored a team-high 23 points, while Eric Gordon and Jaishan Tate each scored 14, and Josh Christopher had 13 for the Rockets, who have lost 8 straight. Jalen Green and David Nwaba chipped in with 12 apiece, and Kenyon Martin Jr. had 11 points. Philadelphia played without Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, and head coach Doc Rivers as they were sidelined because of COVID measures. Assistant coach Dan Burke served as the acting head coach for the 2nd consecutive game. On a lighter note, take a look at these residents of the U.S. Capitol joining a snowball fight organized by the unofficial group, Washington, D.C. Snowball Fight Association. Dozens turned out after a year-long hiatus. Take a look. And finally, in our news, a giant panda cub plays with snow at a zoo in Washington, D.C., rolling and sliding down a hill as the U.S. Capitol is blanketed in snow after a powerful winter storm. Take a look. And as always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Challenges may often come our way, but sometimes it takes a good fall to know where we really stand. And this has been Eagle News International. Stay alert and stay informed because we live in interesting times. Good night.
Napapansin ba ninyo lumiliwanag ang mundo pag magkasama tayo? Life is so much sweeter, everything feels better pag tayong lahat ay together. Let's have fun together, let's play together, kumain, magluto, matuto together, tawanan together, hawak kamay together, we'll be there for each other, we're stronger together. Kaya tara na Pilipino, let's get together, let's all come alive. Kaya tara